Hello, everyone. Welcome to our live chat today with Wendy Aronsson, author of Refeathering the Empty Nest, Life After the Children Leave. Refeathering the Empty Nest is a must-read for any parent preparing for the departure of their youngest child. Aronsson's stories provide hope and guidance to parents whose nest is about to be empty and offers hope to parents whose baby birds have already spread their wings and taken flight. Wendy, thanks so much for joining us today. It's great to have you here.
Well, it's great to be here. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Before we get started, we also want to remind everyone watching to stop by booktrib.com after the chat to enter to win a copy of the book. And Wendy, before we begin the questions, would you please tell us a little bit more about your new book?
Sure. My book examines how the shift, a common occurrence, is unique to each person, and how the impact of your youngest child leaving the nest impacts your nest. As I said, it's unique to each individual person. And I look at it
Great.
from three different stages, from the anticipation phase, the launching phase, the resolution phase. And it impacts the family, it impacts your marriage, it impacts your friends, and not necessarily in a negative way. It can also impact us in a very positive and enriching way.
Great. That's a great response. So the first question that we have, it says, in Refeathering the Empty Nest, you talk about how parents deal with the emptiness experience by using an animal analogy,
Mhm.
hummingbirds, eager beaver, stunned deer. Why did you go to these references to help prove your point?
I went to them to help illustrate that so that people could identify with them. It was less about proving a point and more about identifying with them, and to let people know that these animals, these feelings that we identify in these animals, are something that is fluid. And you can be a little bit of a hummingbird whirling around sometime, and then a couple of days or weeks or month later, you can feel like a stunned deer. Oh my gosh, this is really going to happen. And
Mhm.
then you can be like the eager beaver. Okay, it's going to happen, and I'm going to make, all sorts of lists and organize things and really get moving. So it really is helpful to help the reader conceptualize their feelings and what's going on.
Very interesting. Bailey wants to know, what is the most common thing you see when people talk about their kids leaving home for the first time?
Most common thing I hear is about people's anxiety, about the unknown.
Mhm.
How their life is going to change, how their children's life is going to change, and how they're going to manage, they meaning their young adults, living independently from their parents.
Um, Emma has a little question about your past. You have been a licensed psychotherapist since 1981, so I'm
Yes.
sure you have seen many people deal with this. I'm sorry, I couldn't see the rest of that. Deal with this empty nest syndrome. What tips do you initially give them?
Um, First and foremost is that I don't believe the nest is empty, is to help them to understand that this is an evolving nest and this is a time in their life filled with enormous opportunity. And one thing is to take stock in where they've been and I help them to look at where they're going and where they hope to go and how they hope that their lives will be more enriched and in terms of if they're married, in terms of their marriage, and also in terms of their parenting, meaning with their relationship with their children, but also understanding that whatever they feel, whether it's sadness or anxiety or fear, that these are all typical feelings that many, many people have. They're not alone.
Very inspiring. Rita has a question. She said, what if you want your children to leave the nest, but they are apprehensive? What do you do to ease their reservations?
That's a really good question. Of course, many of us do want our children to leave because that's really our job is to help children become more independent. If your children
Mhm.
have apprehensions, speak to them, talk to them about what they're scared about. See whether you can, identify ways to alleviate some of the apprehensions. I'll give you an example, such as a child who is maybe asthmatic and is concerned about getting an asthmatic attack. One of the things you can do is when you go to college with your young adult to settle them in during orientation is to identify well where the health center is, to identify different places so
Yeah,
that they feel that they have a sense of control as well as that they can do things to help themselves.
that's great. Great response. Bailey has another question about something specific to the book. She said, can you talk a little bit about the Goldilocks challenge? And do visits from kids help or hurt parents who are dealing with empty nest syndrome?
Um, oh, it's not so black and white in terms of helping. Let's
Yeah.
first ask about the Goldilocks challenge. You know,
Okay.
that's really looking at what fits for them. Finding, remember Goldilocks was trying to find where the right chair was and which was the most comfortable. And I use that
Right.
challenge because it's really finding where we as parents are most comfortable in relating to our children and relating to the nest. So if you could imagine Goldilocks, that's kind of like where we are. In terms of helping and hurting, um, I think that it probably does neither. When your young adult returns, it could stir up those old feelings of what it was like when the children were living in the nest. And sometimes everybody regresses back to that. Goes on the floor. They expect meals to be made. Conversely,
Hmm.
parents respond as mommies and daddies versus moms and dads. Um, so
Hmm.
that parents really need to be mindful that when their children leave, they don't come back the same people. And also, we as parents are not the same people. We've come to a new rhythm or are beginning to get to a new rhythm in our lives.
Hmm. I remember going away to college, and I remember them visiting, and it was hard sometimes. And when they dropped me off, I always expected my mother to be the one upset, but my father was the one in tears. It's like you never know how someone's gonna react. And I was like, he's crying, this big man. Like it was crazy. It
Well,
definitely threw me off, so you never know.
you never know. You really don't. And it's all, it's not predictable. And I write that a lot in the book on how we as parents are going to respond or how our children are going to respond being independent.
Yeah, it's a lesson for everyone.
It sure is. It's a
Um,
process.
yeah, absolutely. Emma has a question about reading. She says, "What are some of your favorite books, and what are you currently reading?" If you have the
Oh,
time right now.
Emma, I have to think about that. What are some of my
Yeah,
favorite books? Oh boy. Novels? Are we talking about? Novels would
I think
be
anything.
anything. The first thing that comes to my mind is Gone with the Wind.
Ah,
A very
classic.
long, old book, and that probably is my most favorite book that I have ever
Hmm.
read. And what am I currently reading now? I'm not reading because I really don't have time right now to read.
Yeah.
But I read a lot of books for my profession. That's how I spend most of my time, and I read a lot of
Mhm.
beach reads when I'm away, and fun reads, like, would it be Patterson or Andrew
Yeah.
Gross or any of those
Yeah,
people? Those are
absolutely.
fun, light, easy reads.
That's great. Um, Someone has a question about the shift in your book. They said, can
Mhm.
you explain the shift and what the stages of it are?
Okay. The shift is the change that begins when the youngest child prepares to leave. And it's the process that impacts all aspects, as I said earlier, of the family's life. And the stages are anticipation, launching, and resolution. So let's go back to the first one. Anticipation stage would you might begin to see that when children get their driver's license or they start dating or they start going out with their friends and not having a dinner at home when you're used to having them at home, so that you begin to get
Right.
a flavor or a touch of um, their sense of independence. So anticipation also might include looking at colleges if they're going off to college or military if they go off to
Yeah.
military. It might be writing college applications, your children doing
Mhm.
that and them coming to you for help or questions. So all of these things kind of rummage around in people's heads and it's in the air. The anticipation is in the air. Launching is just as it sounds.
Mm-hmm.
When we take our children to that next step, like when you said, your dad dropped you, your mom and dad dropped you off, and your dad cried. Launching is, getting them settled, whether it's in a dorm room, again, whether it's military, whether it's living, in an apartment, if they're working. It's helping them to launch, and that phase is actually a very protracted phase because
Mm-hmm.
launching happens in ebbs and flows. There's that physical phase of launching, and then there's also the phase of the interaction that occurs during that time when they are launched. How much they're
Mm-hmm.
calling you, how much you're calling them, just what happens in terms of the relationship. And your experience with them being absent also is there. And then there's the
Right.
resolution stage. And that resolution stage would be that you've come to a new rhythm in your life, and your landscape in your life looks very, very different than when it did before they left.
Yeah.
Not just physically, but time-wise and relationship-wise. So it's all those phases that are important stages.
Thank you for the explanation. It's so fascinating. Um, this actually, this next question makes me think of what I was just saying about my mother and father. It says traditionally the mothers feel the most affected when their child leaves home, and they said, what about the fathers? How do they normally feel when this change occurs?
It's really mixed, and that's a good question from your listeners,
Mm-hmm.
because it's not necessarily a mother or father thing. It's also very individual. Usually, the
Yeah.
parent that is front and center in the parenting is going to feel it more acutely. But if you, for have example, two working parents, and one person is in charge much more of the administrative daily, day in,
Mm-hmm.
uh, things with their children, they're going to feel it. But the father who has a weekly tennis game with his
Yeah.
son or daughter, and all of a sudden it's not there, he is going to feel it too. It might not be as
Right.
obvious, but he is going to feel it. So they do experience, they meaning both mother and father experience it, but they experience it differently, and one doesn't
Mm-hmm.
preclude the other.
This is another question about parents and just the differences. How are baby boomer parents different from parents of past generations?
Well, baby boomer parents, we parent differently than
Mm-hmm.
generations before us. We've had children at a different stage than generations before us, and we're very, very hands-on. I talk about, oh, sorry, I talk about in the book the concept of the helicopter parent, which I did not coin. They were hovering, all over the children and doing for the children, and I really felt that, unfortunately, that was such a obviously a negative term, and I see parenting today with us boomers as
Mm-hmm.
precision parenting, and by that I mean we our style of parenting is purposeful and mindful and informed. And back
Mm-hmm.
in the day, 30, 40 years ago, there weren't the resources, both books as well as support groups, as well as information out there about children and about child development that we have at our hands now. So the availability of information and the intense, um, parenting that I feel like we do really differentiates us from the generations before. They were as a generalization, they were much less hands-on. You wouldn't see as many
Yeah.
fathers at the football games or at the show, at their
Right.
performances. And conversely, fathers weren't in the birthing room when babies were born, and they were very, very removed from the process of the pregnancy. So really, things have really evolved enormously for both the men and the women in having children.
Very cool. We wanted to hear a little bit about some of your activity in the medical community. And Ari said, you're very active in the medical community. What do you do to relax? What are some of your favorite activities? to help
Um,
unwind?
oh, okay. I'm learning to play golf, which is very challenging. I love to
Wow.
garden and I love to play tennis. I love being with our young adults, one who is 20 and the
Yes.
other is 24. God, it's hard to believe. And I love, to be with my family, my husband, and just to have family time, which is really special since it's not all the time. One of
Right.
our eldest son lives in New York, and
Hmm.
so about an hour away from us, and our other son is in college. So, family time is really
Yeah.
special. Um,
Hmm.
I love to be active in the community because I love to give back. And to me, that also is a way of relaxing. Giving back is so gratifying for me. Um, so
Absolutely.
it's part of what I love to do.
That's great. Um, Gemma wants to know, can you talk a little bit about the parent exchange that you facilitate over at Greenwich Hospital?
Sure. It's a really special group. I've done two groups. And Parents Exchange is a support group for parents, and they are grouped together by ages, not of the parents, of the children. So if you have elementary school children from fourth grade to sixth grade, for example, no, that would be bad. Two to fourth grade, second to fourth grade. Then about 8 to 10 mothers. We meet weekly during the school calendar, so about 10 to 12 sessions per calendar. And they share struggles. I talk about topics. Um, uh, we talk about things that we can improve on as parents, and some of the challenges that they have. Right now, I am working with a high school group of mothers, and
Oh,
it's so much fun to hear that. I have about 12
yeah.
women in the group, and the challenges that they have anticipating the launch and
Hmm.
anticipating not being an empty nest because many of them, all of them, now that I think about it, have younger children. But as the nest begins to evolve, that's really wonderful. So we do talk, it is
Yeah.
topical, but it is a lot of sharing and a lot of support.
Mhm. Speaking of working with moms, Mother's Day is right around the corner. Do you have any plans? What are you doing for Mother's Day to
Sure,
celebrate?
I do. I'm going to be with my family, my husband and two boys, young men, and my mother.
Great.
So we're going to get together for lunch and just enjoy being with one another.
That's really nice. I'm gonna send my mom some flowers and hang out.
Does she live
Help
locally?
her. Yes, she does. I'll
Oh,
probably help
that's
her
nice.
garden. So
Oh,
yeah, it's
that's
always nice to
nice.
spend time outside. Yeah,
Yes, and it's going
exactly.
to be beautiful.
Yes. Um, Shannon wants to know, what is the push-pull conflict that many parents face?
That's such a good question, Shannon. That is usually during the anticipation phase. It is what
Mhm.
I call the second terrible twos. The first terrible twos we all call the first adolescence, when toddlers are young and they're learning to
Mhm.
walk, and they want to do everything themselves, but they really need our help. And
Right.
the adolescents, conversely, are the same way. So what they do is they push us away and they become difficult and surly and challenging. And because they want to see how well they can do independently. But they also
Mhm.
feel a lot of ambivalence because, on the other hand, they really feel that they need you and they need the parents and they need the mommy and the daddy. And sometimes they need the mom and the dad, which are both very, very different ways of relating to your children. So it's that ambivalent feeling that um, influences their behavior.
Rita wants to know, she said, people have really learned from your book. Did you expect that this would be so successful and widely received by parents in need?
Oh, Rita, you made my day. I really didn't. I did this as a labor of love, and oh, I just get so filled hearing that.
It's very
In my
nice.
book, I write that being a parent was probably the most profound and gratifying experience I've ever had. Um, and that it was no coincidence that I wrote it in anticipation of my youngest son leaving. So I was kind of giving birth again, if you would. And I'm
Right.
just delighted that so many people like it, and it has been well received, and that people can relate to it, and that it's helpful.
Excellent. This I can relate to. Gemma says people are living with their parents later and later in life, and what do you contribute this shift to? And she also says, do you think it's a problem that people 25 to 34 are still at home?
Okay, I didn't hear the first part. You kind of faded out. People are living with their
Oh,
parents later.
sure.
Is that where it
Yep.
is? Okay.
People, yes.
Okay.
So she wants
Um,
to know what. Go ahead.
she wants to know whether I think this is a problem.
Yeah, and she wants to know what do you contribute this shift to?
Those are two separate questions, and I think I'll answer the
Yeah.
first about the shift
Okay.
first. Um,
Hmm.
I contributed to the change. I mean,
Yeah.
very, very simply, the shift is a change, and it's a milestone in everybody's life. So it's just a word to help us understand what and give us a concept of what is going on that impacts us in such a tremendous way. As I said, in every area of our lives. In terms of people living with their parents later and later, what I think contributes to this is the economy. I think a lot of young adults are coming back home, not because they want to, but because they simply can't afford to live on their own. They can't find a job,
Hmm.
or if they have a job, it doesn't allow them to make enough money to live independently. And it depends again where your young adult is located. If they're in a large city, it's going to cost more money to be, to live in a large city. Um, so, do I think this is ideal? No. I think it's a reality. And I
Right.
think with that reality, there are challenges. And the challenge would be to redefine if your young adult is coming back to the nest, uh,
Mhm.
that we call the boomerang children. These boomerang children need to come back. There are different they're young adults now. They're not the same people who left the nest 4 years ago. And
Okay.
you and your spouse, if you're married or not, are not the same people and you have a rhythm. So this is your home they're coming back to. So you have to be very, very clear about what your expectations are, how you want things to look. And the communication between the two of you is essential, or you and whoever is living in the home, is essential because um, they too, the young adults, need to know and need to verbalize what they're expecting. Everybody needs to be upfront. This is not a college dorm.
Exactly.
People aren't going to be there until 3 and 4 in the morning and those kind of
Right.
things. So expectations really need to be clearly outlined. And I think it's okay for children to be in the home, but I think there needs to be, again, clear expectations and hopefully a plan to become independent, to look for a job or find a part-time job or contribute in some way so that they are not, if we as parents take care of them again
Hmm.
when they're young
Right.
adults and they return to the nest, we're really giving them the message that they can't do this by themselves, that they can't
Yeah.
live independently. So that's another important thing. We need to let them know we're behind them and we'll support
Hmm.
them as best we can emotionally uh, and strategically in any way we can. But that being said, that the goal here is for independence.
Excellent answer.
Okay.
Gazelle wants to know what are some of the feelings like that define the empty nest experience?
Oh, they are vast. And in the book, I talk about that. Um, they are the most common one would be anxiety, and
Hmm.
the other would be sadness. And those are the two most common. There's some anger in there.
Hmm.
There's loss, um, and there's excitement, because there, many of us feel, we're excited to watch our children grow and develop, and we're excited to get to this next stage in our life. And what I'm hoping my readers see is that not necessarily is this a loss, it's a change, and with change comes enormous opportunity.
Absolutely. Gazelle has another question. She says, one of the biggest challenges for empty nesters is learning how to relate to their children. And she says, how can parents begin to relinquish control?
I do think it's a challenge how to relate to their children. Funny story. I was at a dinner party the other night and people were talking, and these two mothers said, "Oh, we just broke up with our boyfriend." And I looked up and I said, "Aren't you married?" They said, "Yeah, oh no, our daughters broke up with their boyfriend." And I thought
Uh,
that's such a great example of relinquishing control and stepping away from
yeah.
your children's life.
They're too emotionally
Um,
invested, yeah.
Yes, yes, one is. So, that's a good illustration because really I think we have to be respectful of their adulthood and
Mhm.
have a boundary between ourselves and our young adults. Telling them what to do is going to be is going to have not a very positive impact. Having them learn through the mistakes that
Mhm.
we all made, that they will make, is really going to be the most
Mhm.
powerful thing. So trying to be Socratic with them and asking questions, learning to listen more, I think is really important. Telling
Right.
less, listening more, um, and enjoy them because they bring so much, so much things that are new that even for
Yeah.
me, it's just great. It's such a great gift.
Great advice. Mackenzie wants to know a little bit about the book process of writing the book. She said, how long did it take you to compose the book? And was it an accumulation of years of experience and research?
Um, yes and yes. It
Hmm.
took me 2 years, about 2 years to write the book. I have been in practice in my own work for about 30 years, and hard to believe I can't even get those words out. 30 years. Anyway, so, Mackenzie, so it took me about 2 years, and the first part of the process, I was taking notes and I was really listening. I
Hmm.
would go to a party and I'd hear these mothers say, "Oh my God, I can't believe I'm going to be an empty nester," and they say it was such angst. And then other people would say, "My nest isn't empty. Don't tell me this is what I'm all about." And so hearing
Yeah.
people really, it fascinated me. And then I would, of
Hmm.
course, hear people in my office and hear their struggles. Um, and so that was the initial phase of writing notes and taking notes on both what I heard and doing research during that time, and then
Hmm.
really breaking the book down into what I wanted the reader to take away. So doing it chapter by chapter. I mean,
Yeah.
it's not such a clear recipe. This is my first book, so I would say that it's hard to say exactly how it was done. It was a work in progress.
Excellent. Someone said, Maggie said, your cover is so beautiful. I love the design. Did you have any say in the process?
Yes, I did. I had to say, actually, they asked me um, for ideas for the cover, and I sent what I thought were beautiful ideas, which my publisher politely didn't use. And then they sent me a choice of a couple, and that was the one I chose. I do love it. I'm really, really happy with it.
We
And
do
that's
too. We love it
people's,
here.
yeah,
Right
it's been
behind here.
people's. It's been people's responses from the beginning that they've really loved
Yeah,
the
very
cover.
eye-catching. Um, Jennifer says, do you plan on writing a follow-up to Refeathering the Empty Nest? She says, perhaps the children's take on leaving the nest.
Well, that's an interesting idea. I have thought about that. Not necessarily about the children's take, but I could, which is a good idea. So thank. Um, it could be possibly the next step, and that would be taking this to when your children get married, and how that impacts you and how that impacts your family and kind of, the dynamics that happen, all the different, personalities that get involved, and does that have an impact with in-laws, and patients call them outlaws, and so that's one of the things I'm thinking about. The other thing is I've thought about technology and relationships, not just on children, but children and
Ah,
parents and people and their relationships. So those are ideas that I'm mulling around in my head. I don't know. I enjoyed
that's
doing
really
this.
cool. Alexandra mentioned, have you ever thought about writing other genre books? And she says perhaps young adult or children's. That would be interesting.
I never thought about writing. No, I didn't ever think about writing that.
Mhm.
The I used to specialize in children and adolescents, children and teenagers, and I
Right.
loved that. But I would say that most of my practice is adults. So that would really be my band, I would say.
Mhm. Laura asks, any authors that inspire you? If you could work with anyone in the industry, who would it be and why? Or perhaps a psychotherapist in your line of work.
Um, there are two. Anna Quinlan
Hmm.
is probably first and foremost for me, and in writing this book even, and Gail Sheehy. Both of them wrote, and neither one of them are psychotherapists like myself, but they wrote in a very similar genre, which kind of woven in their own experiences with interviews, with also facts, obviously. So, and I just like how easy and readable it was. Um, so those people were the two I would say that really influenced my writing this type of book.
Cool. Um, Going back to parents and their kids, what alternatives can parents partake in to get their mind off their youngster leaving?
Well, for the stay-at-home parent,
Mhm.
um, I think getting involved in either the community or a hobby, volunteer work, things that they kind of put off once they had children. There were many things that when we were young adults ourselves, we thought, oh, I want to travel, or I want to, learn to garden, or I want to give back to
Mhm.
challenged people, or whatever it may be. But finding that thing that is fulfilling to you, I think, is the most beneficial thing. Um, and knowing that this is the beginning of enormous possibility.
Absolutely. Just as a little summation, Shannon says, do you have any tips for parents dealing with their emotions when it comes to their kids leaving? So just a little summary of what we've talked about.
Yeah, my tips would be to expect the unexpected in terms of your feelings, expect the unexpected in terms of their children's feelings leaving. They're going to have a myriad of them, just like you are. It's a little bit like a roller coaster. There'll
Mhm.
be excitement, they'll be scared, you'll be excited, you'll be scared, you'll be happy, you'll be sad. You're going to, your children might leave their friends in high school, and
Yeah.
you will miss having your young adult, your children around. Um, in terms of dealing with them, I think it's okay to talk about them.
Yeah.
If you have a spouse, then it's a really good thing to do is talk about them. You can also tell them without being weighing heavily on them, um,
Mhm.
them meaning your children who are
Right.
leaving, just how you're excited for them, how you might miss them, but be careful not to put too much burden because you don't want them to feel badly about leaving. Um,
Mhm.
and you might open up the door for them to share their feelings about leaving too. So, communication, communication, communication. And if you find yourself where there are bumps along the way, don't, there are support groups out there. There are people like myself. There are clergy that you can speak to. That whatever feelings that you have, they're okay, and you'll get through them.
Excellent. I think all of your tips have helped a lot of moms and dads today. And We've come to the end of our questions, but I want to thank you again for joining us today and sharing some great insights and stories about refeathering the empty nest. And I also want to remind everyone that is watching today to head over to BookTrib and enter to win a copy of Refeathering the Empty Nest, Life After the Children Leave. It was great to talk to you, Wendy, and have a very happy
Thank you.
Mother's Day.
Well, thank you so very much, and I hope you have fun with your mother.
Thank you. Thanks so much. Bye.
Bye.